It's been a year since CS2 released, and I think a lot of people who play the game agree that there is much to be desired out of the game that is nowhere close to an intended delivery. But when this update shadow dropped, I and a lot of other people were pretty on the rails about what to think about it. Because in one hand, it's basically an operation without the operation aspect anymore, but on the other hand, this update also brought along changes that were pretty much demanded since day one, which finally comes around for people to enjoy. And that change is not a lot if we're gonna be honest here, but it still means a lot to people that this was the thing Valve spent their time on to make the game just ever so slightly being closer to the CS2 we wanted. But to say that the update is perfect is also a little overstatement, because again, it's one way or another, because if you like skins and really wanted the animation fix, then this is a really good update. But if you aren't, then it's basically another continuation of the content drought. Now, the way the whole system works is that you buy a ticket that allows you to earn 40 stars to redeem at an Armory, which, considering that you can trade 4 stars for a skin collection, in a traditional case is at the very least going to set you back $250, this pass is going to be about $10 cheaper than if all the items were cases, and for the player base, that incentivizes them to keep playing to earn more stars, which on paper is a genuinely excellent alternative to the seasonal case at the cost of it being more expensive up front. Very quickly, people found out that they could get experience fast and quick by queuing on casuals and then trying to kill each other as fast as possible to get stars very fast and very efficiently. This becomes a problem though due to how people who didn't want to opt into the XP farm would get immediately vote kicked, so that basically meant that a whole game mode was just unplayable and for who knows how long. I want people to understand that the reason why Valve patched out the nade XP wasn't because they were exploiting the metrics, because if it can be a metric then you can game the system no matter what. The same issue happened in operations and people did the same stuff as well, but at the very least it was only for a week, so it wasn't as disruptive. So if it wasn't due to the XP, it was due to the sheer volume of people that were farming XP in this specific way that it hijacked a whole game mode and was doing way more to disrupt the player experience than any cheater that people used to argue that this was exclusively done for money. When you encounter a cheater in CS2, there's a good chance that you can probably just requeue and you're not going to encounter another one, depending on if you have a high trust factor. Now granted, new players are not going to have a high trust factor because they start at 0, but don't worry about that. But when you encounter an Armory XP farm, it's annoying, but now you can't requeue or are just forced to play on a different game mode because every single casual server is just going to be doing the same thing, so now you just don't get to play for the next 3 weeks, or even in the worst case, 3 months. Valve basically created a system that incentivized players to turn casual into dedicated man versus machine tour lobbies. And brother, you just spawned in with a gas passer.
When you're delaying my game and just being annoying, no. No. So that's why I am trying to kick you. I am still speaking. And then after...
Now, that patch as of me writing this still didn't fix the problem with matchmaking, so I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to scrap the Armory after a while, since it's basically going to ruin a whole game mode for skins. But this whole issue concerns a larger issue that has been noted by the larger CS community, where most of the service has become extremely heavily centered around the gambling aspect of the game, because of the fact that it has a market value as opposed to games like Call of Duty or Valorant. We can spend all day talking about how bad MTX is, but like, that pales in comparison to how much of the gambling aspect of Counter-Strike has just had a death grip on the community ever since CS2 came out. As of late, I've been noticing a lot more accounts that promote these sites or major content creators oriented around these services that are basically selling gambling addictions to people that are going to ruin their fucking lives because they saw their favorite streamer freak out over a cool skin they got. I also find that a lot of those accounts tend to also be the ones spearheading most of the shit flinging that goes around with this game as well, which is a shame because, believe it or not, but this game is actually really fucking good. Not like the people who are trying to exploit you for profit are gonna admit that, because as it turns out, complaining about this game a lot turns into a lot of people paying attention to you, and people looking at you means more links you can get people to click on your gambling sponsor. Now, since I don't want to come off as a Puritan here, I don't think the entire premise of the skins in CS2 are inherently malicious when you choose to consume them in moderation. Sometimes I just want a really cool looking skin. But at the same time, I choose to be aware of what I spend because that expense snowballs fast, despite $250 not sounding like a lot for just one key. It's a matter of balancing how much you're spending and knowing when to set a boundary of when you're like, okay, no more for me, I'm already good with what I got. And like I said, buying an Armory pass in the long run is inherently more valuable to be giving compared to buying 10 keys, so buying one is a really good choice if you intend to have value over convenience. But just because it is a better deal, that isn't a green light to be dropping $80 fucking to buy 5 of them all at once, because that is already way too much to be spending in one sitting for microtransactions. And you especially shouldn't be flagging that shit around too, because that just enables more people to do that as well because of FOMO. So then, people who really shouldn't be doing that is now just doing it because it's trendy. And some people just do the XP farm because they consider it to be the only fun they've had with the game since the release. And that's so fucking stupid if you think about it. If you aren't happy with the state of a game and the creators aren't providing you with the content you demand, then giving them money for shit you don't want is not going to fix your issue. You're just going to be more miserable like all the other losers that needed to spend their weekend grinding for a blue Desert Eagle and hope that they don't get vac banned in the process. But hey, you're sticking it to the man, I guess.
Wow guys, you sure showed me by giving me more money.
By the time you ruin casual matchmaking to grind for a couple chances to get a rare skin, you could have just gotten 32 skins immediately, and with the added bonus of a chance at a knife or glove that is going to be way more than anything you're going to get from the Armory. But if I told you to buy 32 case keys, most of you would probably be shitting yourself at the price tag before you even got to the 10th key, because now you're being more conscious of your purchase because you have to buy a larger quantity of these items, as opposed to having to spend your weekend nade spamming Dust 2 like a jackass because you thought you beat the economy, up until the economy gives you an ROI of negative 68%. Yeah, so it turns out that gambling is actually almost always guaranteed a net loss to the buyer, which is why those $500 skins are only $500, because that's pretty much the amount the seller had to spend to make it that expensive. So to me, it seems like the issue with the Armory stems from a general misconception of how it works, because if it is implemented properly, then it can be an excellent alternative to the cases, since the cases are already a big hassle since you need to get one in the first place, which might mean having to spend even more money, or grinding your way to get a case in the weekly drop, which is usually never worth it anyway, whereas here, you can just simply skip all the keys and just pick between the select few cases at a discounted price, which should be excellent for the consumer, until you choose to max out the pass limit. And this is where Valve should get some flack here, because people should not have been able to do that in the first place, or at the very least, limited it to 2 at the same time. Sure, the XP gain grind will be slower, but buying the pass to min-max gambling at a lower price should not be the fucking point of the Armory here, because you could have just made the keys cheaper if that was the intended goal. The objective seems to be that you want to reward players that play more, which should be a good idea, but it's tied to a metric that can be gamed, like XP. So then, the metric should be to something that can't be gamed if both teams are required to compete to earn the points, like if you won the match or what position you were in deathmatch. Those by itself have its own problems too if you take into account that nade spamming nades in middle is just going to turn into an HVH session. So if Valve doesn't want to make it more like an HVH session, then that should probably be an incentive to make it so that they fully deploy their VACnet system, so that it doesn't become an issue to ensure that every match is under the fair play guideline. And that's really the rest I do have to say about this issue, but I really want to in a much later date talk about Counter-Strike 2, because I really like this game despite its issues, and I think I am among a lot of other people in this community that is just exhausted for the amount of bitter resentment that this game gets, as if the same shit was being said about CSGO today compared to CS2 wasn't the same exact crap being said about CSS when CSGO was the fresh new game. This kind of stuff isn't new to the field either. The same thing has been happening with games like Tekken, Street Fighter, Call of Duty. It's always been like this for the game industry, but again, that should be a discussion for later. But if you do want to get into the Armory, just do it for fun instead of being lame and trying to game the system at an entire game mode's expense for a $2 skin. Just play the game and have some fun instead of robbing yourself out of the time you could have spent hanging out with people like Joe Biden. Do we have one last soda?
Soda!